More than 2 weeks after Hamas terrorists invaded Israel, Barack Obama took a break from counting mounds of cash like a real-life version of Mr. Krabs to release a statement on what's happening in Israel and Gaza. And it's as arrogant, moronic, and tone-deaf as you'd expect from someone who somehow made the Middle East a more dangerous place. So here's what he said. It's been 17 days since Hamas launched its horrific attack against Israel, killing over 1,400 Israeli citizens, including defenseless women, children, and the elderly. In the aftermath of such unspeakable brutality, the US government and the American people have shared in the grief of families, prayed for the return of loved ones, and rightly declared solidarity with the Israeli people. Okay, so far so good. The first paragraph has to be kind of normal. As I stated in an earlier post, Israel has a right to defend its citizens against such wanton violence, and I fully support President Biden's call for the United States to support our longtime ally in going after Hamas, dismantling its military capabilities, and facilitating the safe return of hundreds of hostages to their families. Okay, a few things. One, I hate the arrogance that comes with the phrase, Israel has a right to defend itself. People don't say this about any other country. When Russia invaded Ukraine, were people falling over themselves to say that yes, Ukraine has a right to defend itself? No, because it's assumed. But when it's the Jews, they apparently need the permission of people like Barack Obama to not just sit there and be slaughtered like cattle. How nice of him to give them his blessing. Also, notice his squishy language, dismantling the military capabilities of Hamas. Hamas isn't a military organization, it's a terrorist organization. This is the same bullshit PC nonsense we're seeing from media outlets, terrified of taking a side against people who raped women in the street, pulled children's eyes out and cut off fingers and limbs, burned families alive, and murdered people in their beds. And then after 2 paragraphs, we get to the classic real Barack Obama, both sides crap, that really is to blame for this latest attack. But even as we support Israel, we should also be clear that how Israel prosecutes this fight against Hamas matters. In particular, it matters, as President Biden has repeatedly emphasized, that Israel's military strategy abides by international law, including those laws that seek to avoid, to every extent possible, the death or suffering of civilian populations. Upholding these values is important for its own sake, because it is morally just and reflects our beliefs in the inherent value of every human being. Upholding these values is also vital for building alliances and shaping international opinion, all of which are critical for Israel's long-term security. Okay, so what's he saying here? He's blaming every single civilian casualty in Gaza and other Palestinian areas on just one side, Israel. If they fail to avoid these casualties, which they will, then they're to blame for the collapse of any made-up alliances and international opinion, all of which are apparently critical for Israel's long-term security. What is he talking about? Again, it's the same arrogant crap that Israel needs other people's permission to even exist. And back to the civilian problem, he hasn't mentioned yet that Hamas intentionally hides behind its own people, but he never mentions at all that Israel does more than any other country to avoid civilian casualties. So with one side of his face, he's saying that Israel has a right to defend itself and going after Hamas is the right thing to do, but on the other, he's not admitting that Hamas are forcing Israel to choose between harming civilians and doing nothing. If they do nothing, Hamas wins. If they attack in any way, it's impossible to avoid civilian casualties, even with everything Israel already does to minimize this, like roof knocking and warning text messages, so Hamas wins again. Obama knows this, he just doesn't care. And let's not pretend for a second that Obama gives a shit about civilian casualties. This is the same president who fired off over 500 drone strikes when he was in office, killing around 3,800 people, including 324 civilians, while also bending over a barrel for Iran and handing the Middle East over to ISIS, who raped, burned, and murdered their way across 41,000 square miles of the continent. But now, sitting in one of his many mansions and typing away on a blog post, he really cares. This is an enormously difficult task. War is always tragic, and even the most carefully planned military operations often put civilians at risk. As President Biden noted during his recent visit to Israel, America itself has at times fallen short of our higher values when engaged in war, and in the aftermath of 9/11, the US government wasn't interested in heeding the advice of even our allies when it came to the steps we took to protect ourselves against al-Qaeda. Now, after the systematic massacre of Israeli citizens, a massacre that evokes some of the darkest memories of persecution against the Jewish people, it's understandable that many Israelis have demanded that their government do whatever it takes to root out Hamas and make sure such attacks never happen again. Moreover, Hamas's military operations are deeply embedded within Gaza, and its leadership seems to intentionally hide among civilians, thereby endangering the very people they claim to represent. Still, the world is watching closely as events in the region unfold, and any Israeli military strategy that ignores the human cost could ultimately backfire. Already, thousands of Palestinians have been killed in the bombing of Gaza, many of them children. Hundreds of thousands have been forced from their homes. the Israeli government's decision to cut off food, water, and electricity to a captive civilian population threatens not only to worsen a growing humanitarian crisis, it could further harden Palestinian attitudes for generations, erode global support for Israel, play into the hands of Israel's enemies, and undermine long-term efforts to achieve peace and stability in the region. Okay, so according to St. Obama, what can Israel do? If they use airstrikes, they're putting civilians at risk. If they use a ground invasion, they're putting civilians at risk. If they cut off free supplies to the people trying to kill them, they're putting civilians at risk. And he has the balls to frame this out of concern for the bad PR Israel is going to get, while also spitting out Hamas propaganda at the same time. Don't forget the death counts we're getting from Gaza aren't from international groups or media. It's from the same people who told us that Israel bombed a hospital and killed 500 people, when it was actually Islamic Jihad who bombed a car park and killed 50 people. And look, I'm not saying that innocent civilians aren't being killed or hurt in Gaza. And I'm not saying that their lives don't matter. They do, because all lives matter, and all lives have equal value. Any civilian death is tragic, whether it's in Israel or Gaza, or if they're Jewish or Muslim. The problem here is that Obama is ironing over any wrinkle that places any responsibility on the people who actually started this war and putting it all on the victims of the attack. And then he gets even squishier. It's therefore important that those of us supporting Israel in its time of need encourage a strategy that can incapacitate Hamas while minimizing further civilian casualties. Israel's recent shift to allow relief trucks into Gaza, prompted in part by the Biden administration's behind-the-scenes diplomacy, is an encouraging step, but we need to continue to lead the international community in accelerating critical aid and supplies to an increasingly desperate Gaza population. And while the prospects of future peace may seem more distant than ever, we should call on all of the key actors in the region to engage with those Palestinian leaders and organizations that recognize Israel's right to exist, to begin articulating a viable pathway for Palestinians to achieve their legitimate aspirations for self-determination, because that is the best and perhaps only way to achieve the lasting peace and security most Israeli and Palestinian families yearn for. We need to encourage a strategy that can take out Hamas while minimizing civilian casualties. Any ideas, Barry? No, of course not, because it's easy to sit thousands of miles away and look at the Middle East you helped f*** up even more than it was before and say, oh, we should try and not hurt civilians. Yes, obviously. But one side of this conflict doesn't care about civilians on either side, and that side is Hamas. He offers no ideas beyond giving Gaza free stuff and sucking up to Palestinian leaders who, in his imagination, support Israel's right to exist. But who are these leaders? He can't name any because they're not the ones in charge. The ones in charge are paying Hamas terrorists for the murder of Jews. And then there's his conclusion, which is even more of the classic Barack Obama, I just shoved divisive stuff down your throat, but now I'm going to lecture you on unity and togetherness, and every side is equally victimized. Finally, in dealing with what is an extraordinarily complex situation, where so many are in pain and passions are understandably running high, all of us need to do our best to put our best values rather than our worst fears on display. That means actively opposing anti-Semitism in all its forms, everywhere. It means rejecting efforts to minimize the terrible tragedy that the Israeli people have just endured, as well as the morally bankrupt suggestion that any cause can somehow justify the deliberate slaughter of innocent people. It means rejecting anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, or anti-Palestinian sentiment. It means refusing to lump all Palestinians with Hamas or other terrorist groups. It means guarding against dehumanizing language towards the people of Gaza or downplaying Palestinian suffering, whether in Gaza or the West Bank, as irrelevant or illegitimate. It means recognizing that Israel has every right to exist, that the Jewish people have claim to a secure homeland where they have ancient historical roots, and that there have been instances in which previous Israeli governments made meaningful efforts to resolve the dispute and provide a path for a two-state solution, efforts that were ultimately rebuffed by the other side. That's a polite way of saying rejected. It means acknowledging that Palestinians have also lived in disputed territories for generations, that many of them were not only displaced when Israel was formed, but continued to be forcibly displaced by a settler movement that too often has received tacit or explicit support from the Israeli government. That Palestinian leaders who've been willing to make concessions for a two-state solution have too often had little to show for their efforts. From who? And that it is possible for people of goodwill to champion Palestinian rights and oppose certain Israeli government policies in the West Bank and Gaza without being anti-Semitic. Perhaps most of all, it means we should choose not to always assume the worst in those with whom we disagree. In an age of constant rancor, trolling and misinformation on social media, at a time when so many politicians and attention seekers see an advantage in shedding heat rather than light, pot calling the kettle black, it may be unrealistic to expect respectful dialogue on any issue, much less on an issue with such high stakes and after so much blood has been spilled. But if we care about keeping open the possibility of peace, security, and dignity for future generations of Israeli and Palestinian children, as well as for our own children, then it falls upon all of us to at least make the effort to model, in our own words and actions, the kind of world we want them to inherit. And then he provides some links for some New York Times morons and Ben Rhodes who helped him burn down the Middle East. Barack Obama didn't actually suggest any real solutions, because even he knows that the only thing you can do with a group like Hamas is destroy them. How else do you deal with 12th century barbarians who are driven by an evil ideology to rape, burn, torture, mutilate, and murder innocent men, women, children, and babies just because they're Jewish? The reason this statement is so offensive isn't just because Obama has the guts to lecture us on civilian casualties after he's killed hundreds of innocent people with drone strikes, or because he was the one who enabled Iran to fund the terror we're seeing now. The reason this is so offensive is because it's simply the same old elitist arrogance giving us the same old anti-Semitic double standard routine that puts the world's only Jewish country in an impossible situation. Jews in Israel are being killed because they're Jews. According to Obama, they have a right to defend themselves. Thanks, Obama. But if they defend themselves, they must go after the people attacking them. And these people are using Palestinian civilians as cover, many of whom, even though no one wants to say this, still support Hamas. And Obama has no answer to this. Biden has no answer to this. Blinken has no answer to this. No one has an answer to this if they're unwilling to admit the obvious. Civilian casualties are tragic, but when your enemy is using them as human shields, you can't avoid them. And if the fact that civilian casualties are inevitable upsets you, and it really should, then maybe your anger should be directed at the people using them as human shields, instead of the Jews who are daring, for the first time in history, to actually fight back.